All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. Dan and I are joined here by Turquoya Rudnitski. I think I got that right, or T or Turk. You might have seen her on Instagram as T Fitty, and if you've seen her there, you know that she's a very well developed, hopefully well established bodybuilder in the natural bodybuilding ranks. And we're going to dive into her background today, kind of chat, just get to know her a little bit and hopefully allow you guys to get to know her as well. So I'm going to turn it over to you just for a little bit of, a background, how you got started, a little bit about yourself, the whole thing.
Sure. So my name's Turquoya, as you said. I guess I really wasn't looking to get into bodybuilding when it happened. I actually was on one of my friend's Snapchats in the gym, and my current diet coach saw it and was like, "What are those shoulders? I need to meet this person." And so they got me into it, Alicia and Dennis at Los Campeones in Northeast. And I just started competing after that. So it wasn't this long thought out process, and I'm enjoying it because I get to learn as I go along instead of having this goal of whatever it may be and working up to it. I kind of just get to enjoy the process and meet people and learn through experiences, which has been really great.
So you had your debut season last year, right? 2021,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So how long before that had you been training then? Obviously, you got a good structure, but adults don't happen on their own.
Right. So my show was October of 2021, and I started training seriously about June of that same year.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So a true diamond in the rough. So let's talk about those early days of lifting. What got you into lifting? Was it sports? Was it just recreational? Let's hear that a little bit.
So I've always been in sports. In high school, I was in track and basketball mainly. College, I did track for my first year, and then I switched to rugby. And then I did CrossFit for a while, and all of those were kind of beating up my body. So I'm like, there has to be something different where I can still continue to make gains in my physique. And then that's exactly the time that I kind of fell into bodybuilding. I was like, oh, this is something I can kind of do for my entire life. I plan on staying natural for my entire life. So there's a healthier aspect to it, I suppose, minus, the cutting of prep and everything like that. But I just wanted to take the healthiest route and something that has longevity for the rest of my life. And I landed up here.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, right? Because it truly is. I mean, some of the greatest bodybuilders, of this generation or in general that are natural are mid to late 30s, and then you see guys like Jeff Alberts and lots of other people well into their 50s. Craig Yarnell, who we interviewed, that are just still competing at a high level. And like you said, like yeah, there are certain inherent risks with lifting continuously, but if you actually look at the incidence rate of injury in bodybuilders, it's relatively low versus, I mean, you said rugby, like it's pretty violent. I played for 2 years, and yeah, the number of injuries I had playing that versus bodybuilding can't even compare.
Hmm. Yeah, I had a
Yeah,
concussion and I was like, something's got to change. So that was my big moment where I had to turn into something different.
Yeah, those are no fun, especially as an adult where you have to go to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer I'll skip class and stay home and it'll be fun. You got to pay bills.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk. You said what, like 4 months is when you started taking training seriously? So were you from the get-go with your diet coach? You kind of restructured things, or was the training completely all you? And what does that look like? I'm sure people want to know.
Sure. So most of my training, I kind of just do what felt good for my body or something. Like if I hadn't been to the gym for a while, I knew if I hit shoulders, they would blow up right away. So it would kind of give me that, instant gratification that us bodybuilders like, which kind of kept me going.
I love
As for the
pump.
yes. And as for the diet aspect, I was eating way under what a normal person should be eating. When I first met Alicia, I think it was about 1,300 calories a day. And I was like, this doesn't feel healthy. And it wasn't. So it was an easier prep in that I didn't have to come down and lose a bunch of weight, bunch of fat. It was more just kind of growing into the show, which I feel just sounds easier than coming down. Like even this time around, I'm like, oh, this does suck a little bit more. I had to actually lose some fat and really hit the diet hard. And I'm like, that just was not as enjoyable as building and growing into a show.
Absolutely. Now, were the 1,300 calories intentional? Were you intentionally trying to eat, or in that regards, or was it just that was your natural kind of tendency?
I'm gonna be transparent, and I was going through some things mentally, so I just wasn't hungry. I didn't have the appetite. And of course, when I saw myself looking more lean than sickly, in my opinion, I was like, oh, this looks great. Like I'm doing something. And then I met Alicia and she's like, no, we're going to bump your calories up. You're going to like the way you look a lot more. You're going to feel stronger. You're going to get through your lifts. And then I kind of, through bodybuilding, which seems kind of backwards, I developed healthier eating patterns. Versus I kind of hear sometimes, you know, when people see themselves on stage, they're like, I got to stay here. This is such a good look. I get so many compliments. And I actually more enjoy being on the bigger side now, where I feel healthy and I can grow and I can, you know, use that time to build my muscle even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There are certainly people that have issues when it comes to dieting and food relationships and stuff, but there are also, just like yourself, a large number of people too that I feel like once you have intentionally gained X amount of weight and intentionally lost X amount of weight and understand the process, I feel much more comfortable gaining 30, 40 pounds because I know what it takes to take it right back off. So I don't stress about it as much. Yeah.
Exactly.
I still don't look fantastic when I'm that heavy, but you know, oh well.
I know, looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, I was huge. But in that moment, my mind wasn't, oh, you look fat. It was, wow, look at all the muscle you put on in the off season. So
well, you
again,
piled on a lot of
shifting.
muscle. I saw your off season shots. Yeah.
That was my goal. Is again, I understood as a natural person, most of it probably wouldn't stick going into the show that I have in about 2.5 weeks, but enough stuck where I can see a noticeable difference between last year and this year. So that's the goal at the end of the day.
Awesome. Cause in going back to last year, kind of feeding into this year, last year you debuted at an OCB show, I believe.
Yep, the Natural Viking.
Why don't you run through kind of how your season went and then transition, you know, how you're starting this season, goals for the season. I think I'd love to hear that.
So I went into it, about 3 weeks before the Natural Viking, I had some snacks that I now understand I should not have had. And so I think everyone kind of goes through maybe that phase in the beginning where they're like, oh, let's see what I could maybe get away with, or I'm really starving. I don't know what to do. I've never been here before. What do I do? But it wasn't bad. So I was kind of discouraged leading up into the Viking. I didn't really think I was going to do anything special. And then I ended up winning and getting my pro card. And then there was a show 2 weeks later, a USBF show in Burnsville, I believe. And I ended up getting first in my class overall for pros and then second overall. So that kind of was like, wait, I might be onto something here. So this prep, I really went into it really serious. My off season, I used to grow, and then this has been almost exactly to the T since about June 10th. I started seriously coming down. So I feel I gave myself a lot more time. I understood now, like that feeling of cheating on your diet. You're just like, man, like I'm really just cheating myself. I'm not hurting anyone but myself after doing all this other work. So this time I had a really good head on my shoulders going into it. So I'm really excited what I'm about to do at Yorton in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big show to jump into. So that'll be a good test for you. You know, obviously prove that, you know, 2 shows, 2 pro wins, that states a lot, right? I always like to know the numbers, right? Especially since you know, this was relatively rapid in the world of natural bodybuilding. Yes. So what was the first contest weight? What'd you get to in the off season? And then kind of what are you coming down to now?
Sure. So my first show I was about 142. The second show I'd say.
How tall are you?
5'7".
5'7". Okay.
And then my second show, like 141, still around 142, but got a little bit leaner. And then in my off season, I got up to about 175. I think
nothing
the peak
to be
of that
of there.
I know, it just sounds like a lot of weight.
It sounds like a lot, but yeah, no. Yeah. I saw that. Like I said, I saw the shots. Yeah.
So yeah, 175. The peak was kind of February, and then I started the prep June 10th at about 168, and I'm 148 right now.
Okay, so you pulled a good amount off in a good amount of time, but like you said, you're only a couple weeks away, right? So, but still some differences on the scale. Would you say that right now you're on pace for the same, if not better, conditioning?
I would say better conditioning, but I might go on stage a couple pounds heavier, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Not unexpected since you haven't been competing all that long, right? Like,
right.
It seems like a lot of growth potential still since you're just in the last 2 years really kind of taking the bodybuilding specifically serious. So that's exciting to see how much is going to change for you.
Yes. And so no matter what, I already know that I look better than my last peak. So no matter what happens, I can't really be upset about any outcome.
Yeah, that's a good mindset to have, right? Because a lot of people get uber competitive and, I got to beat this guy and I'm going to show them.
Right.
Like, at the end of the day, you're standing on stage next to them. There's no interaction. Like, you just gotta. It's in the judge's hands. As long as you've outdone yourself, you've won, right? As cliche as that is to say.
Exactly, and that's what I try to keep my mindset. Like, I never, like the first show, I maybe looked around at competitors a little bit and be like, all right, am I lean enough? Am I whatever? And this time, I haven't looked at a single person, and I couldn't be happier. Just mentally, I feel much more clear. Again, I'll critique myself pretty heavily still, but I don't really understand I have to beat this person. It's like, okay, well, I've already beat my physique from last year. And I think, at least for me, that seems like the goal of bodybuilding. Obviously, it would be nice to win Yorton, but that's not the end all be all.
No. Self-improvement is definitely the name of the game when it comes to that. But
like
you said,
at the end of the day, you can only control your own outcome. So, you can't control others unless you want to sabotage people.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point there of like not really stalking the competitors on social media and all that stuff. Because I think now if you're self-coached, it's probably more of a concern, but you see a competitor, you think they're leaner, and in reality it's lighting and angles and all the other garbage that people do, and you dramatically change your plan, and now you're throwing your plan off because of something that they're doing when, who knows, do they actually look that way, or are you throwing off your symmetry? And yeah, I was actually just listening to the Revive Stronger podcast this morning, and they were talking about like when Steve judged and like getting the inside scoop on like how you're actually judged. It makes, there's so much more to it than what you think, right? It's not all conditioning. It's not all size. There's a balance, and you can win in certain areas, lose in certain areas. So really, you just got to optimize what you have and hope that it's enough to edge out the other people.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I know I have a kind of a strange structure. I have a really long torso and shorter legs, and then really long limbs. So I had to really build up my biceps and triceps this season. I wanted to get a little bit more lower lat development, a little bit of my like lower erectors, just because it looks kind of silly on me when my middle back is so meaty and my upper lats are good, but then it kind of just disappeared. So I did a really good job on focusing on those things, because at the very least, I would like to have the widest back on stage. That is something I do take a lot of pride in. I've worked really hard on my back and shoulders specifically.
Seeing your photos, I would put you in contention there for sure. Regardless of any of the other judging, I could say the delts and the width, that's there for sure.
No disagreement for me.
Yeah. So this is funny. You brought up erector training. This is actually something I just posted about today, and will be posting about a series going forward. Talk to me about how you specifically went about that.
So I don't know if you've heard of the RP Strength Instagram. I watch that like religiously.
Big fan of RP.
Yes. And so I was just kind of testing out a couple movements, and I always never thought that I should kind of round my lower back in a deadlift. And I started doing that with a lighter weight, and I felt so much activation. And then after about 3 weeks of doing that consistently, I was like, wait, I can kind of see them coming in a little bit. And then because of that too, I would start to have better lower lat connection throughout the rest of my workout. And I was like, oh, and it's actually my boyfriend who showed me most of it, so I should give him some credit. But just kind of playing around with movements, I was like, okay, I feel this and it doesn't hurt. So, which may not be the smartest way to go about some things, but I always start with a lighter weight. So if something feels off, I can kind of tell immediately and then switch to something different.
James is the PT here, so
yeah.
I'm not going to comment.
I am a fan. So like the idea of like tissue resilience and tissue capacity, right? If you train the tissue progressively in a manner, it should be able to compensate and adapt. There's a lot of people that are terrified of rounding at all, when in reality, when you look at the evidence, there's rounding that's happening even if you think you're not. So train it. And it's actually something that I'm doing now for my erectors, is like Jefferson deadlifts and intentionally like rounding and extending. And I saw too that you do, I don't know if it was more recent or it's something you've been doing, but like the I'm going to call it like a round back row as well, right? Like that extra range of motion coming from your low back, extending up as you come, not being as strict with that motion. I think is fantastic, right?
The
Because you're using,
flexion row, right?
yeah, I think
Yep.
that's what
I
they
think
call it.
that's what
Yeah,
RP's called it. Yeah.
Yeah, they
yeah,
do. I learned
yeah.
everything, and I actually hired Jared Feather for my last 4 weeks. I was like, man, I should have hired you before, but I love everything you do. So he's helping me these last 4 weeks into my show. So
Awesome, awesome. Good guy, good coach, very knowledgeable.
super knowledgeable.
Yeah, cool. So you talked. So Yorton is the first show. Is there
Yes.
anything on the plan after the Yorton right now?
So I'm thinking of maybe doing the USBF show again in Burnsville. However, I see that OCB has that rule now where if you compete in a different organization, then I can't compete with them for 2 years. I'm like, I'm still very conflicted.
I think the caveat was if that show doesn't urine test and polygraph. Now, I
Yeah.
believe, does the USBF polygraph?
They do not. They just do the urine
Jeez.
testing, right? So
Gotcha,
that's where I'm like,
gotcha.
so I'm kind of toying with the idea of maybe trying to qualify for Worlds. I don't know if IPE does polygraph, but that would just be a fun show to do, close enough to the Midwest where I could drive out there.
Mhm. Yeah, I believe, now I haven't competed with them, but I believe the IPE and ANBF does polygraph
Okay,
as well. I
that's good
think
to
them
know.
and the WNBF as well.
Okay. Yeah, that was my plan, but I don't know. I like the fact that the USBF show is right down the street, don't have to pay for travel. I can stay at my own house because competing is much more expensive than I thought.
Yes,
It is. Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely is. People overlook that, right? And especially on the female side. Sorry for you guys. You got to buy, I mean, the hair, the makeup, all that stuff. If I get a haircut before my show, it's like $40. That's it. That's my added
Right.
expenses. So yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it and people don't understand. And I don't blame you whatsoever for competing locally. Like, yeah, there's
Right.
shows in California I'd love to go to, but price of a plane ticket, hotel there, plus all the other stuff, it's just it adds up. And until there's money in the sport, which we're trying to get, slowly, eventually, hopefully,
Yes.
it definitely limits people to certain, geographical regions, unless you're
Right.
just the top of the top and, you've made it and you got to go to the worlds or something like that,
Right.
which
So yeah,
I think,
it's kind of a bummer because even this Charlotte show, I was like, all right, now there's like an airline worker shortage, so I don't want my flight to be, canceled or delayed. So now we decided to
mhm,
drive, and now I don't know how my body is going to react to driving for 17
mhm,
hours. So there's a lot of unknown variables, but I'm just going to try to do the best I can and power through.
yeah. Yeah, Dan knows all about that. How many shows were you doing while you were driving around or prepping the last 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, I drove out for Mr. America. It wasn't a 17-hour drive though.
No.
It was a 6.5. Well, I think it turned into 7.5 because I got caught in Philly. But yeah, and running through a peak week and drinking way too much liquid and having to stop to pee every 30 minutes. But that's a tangent.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Well, hey, you guys could do. We just interviewed Greg Brimick. If you remember, Dan, what he and his brother did, they rented an RV, and
That's right. They did do
the
that.
brother that
Yeah.
was competing just laid in the back and rested the whole time while the rest of the
Smart.
family drove him across the country with the RV. I
Smart.
think that's a brilliant idea. That's fantastic. Make it a road trip.
It's true. I could maybe get some friends together, but man.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Charlotte's a great place to be anyway. I don't know if you're extending your stay there, but I mean, I know some guys that do that. They'll go, Florida vacation, they do their show and then they stay for a week and just make it a whole family affair. And that's kind of the way you got to do it
Right.
with the finances the way they are. You want to make you the best of the trip.
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So some potential other later shows. That's good to hear, right? Obviously we like to follow along the journey. And then what do you think, you had a partial year off season.
Mhm.
Will you extend that off season a little bit longer this next time? You think you need to grow or you need the time or you want to jump right back into it after that?
I think I should grow for a while just because I do want to eventually come in absolutely undeniable. And I know I need to bring my
Mhm.
legs up a little bit, specifically like my quad sweep. I'd like to develop my calves a little bit more. That's one thing I've been trying to work on too. And just obviously, I want to put more meat on my back just because I love it. But
Mhm.
I think it all depends too if I decide to do this USBF show because then I'd really probably just take 2 years off, because might as well. I have to take 2 years off from OCB anyway. So maybe at that point I would then have to requalify and then try Yorton again in a couple of years.
Yeah, we won't dive into our opinions on certain policies within other organizations. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
gotten into that. I had some choice words already, so I'll bite my tongue this time. But I
yes.
was going to suggest maybe doing Mr. America, but you would run
Ooh.
into a similar thing with Mr. America as you would with USBF, because they do not polygraph.
Okay.
They might offer a polygraph
Mhm.
if you request it, because I competed last year and they were
Mhm.
offering it to OCB athletes, but OCB doesn't seems to have a little bit of a, I don't know, thing with Mr.
Not a
America though. So
yeah, they
yeah,
seem to be butting heads. There's been some bans and stuff and all sorts of other fun behind the scenes
I
action.
don't know that there's anything that's come out of Mr. America directly, but like the policies that they've implemented and some of the statements they made have kind of alluded to that or implied that,
Yeah.
so to speak.
There's been some stuff, but I
Yeah.
won't I won't air it. Yeah. So yeah, that would be another fantastic show. I mean, that is, and we've talked about it on the podcast a couple times. I think going to be in the next couple of years like one of the pinnacles of natural bodybuilding shows. I mean, you're getting people across federations. You're getting some very big names coming. I mean, it's a cool title, right? Call yourself Mr. America. Why wouldn't you want to do it?
Exactly.
And it's apparently a great venue this year. I know the venue last year was pretty good. I competed there at a different show. Their lighting is great, and they're getting the CBS involved, right? So
Yeah, I saw that. That was
can't,
intriguing.
yeah, right. Can't beat it. Can't beat it. Everyone wants to get on TV. Dan managed to.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. So Dan, any follow up questions? Anything you want to dive into?
I don't think any follow-up questions. The only thing I would say is I think some of us are going to be at Mr. America. So if you do decide to go out there, get to meet. I think myself,
Right.
I think James, you're probably going, Leroy's going.
I try to.
There's gonna be a good crew there. So
That's like what, mid-October?
I
it
believe
was
so.
it was the
10th.
8th last year, so I think it's somewhere around like I think it might be
Yeah.
the 9th, because I think it's still that first or second Saturday. But yeah, like
Okay.
mid early October. So
I'll
Yeah.
have to think about it, because I still would
Yeah.
be in shape. So maybe, who knows?
There you go.
Maybe I'll make a
Toss your hat in
surprise
the ring.
appearance. Exactly.
There you go. There you go. All right. So we always like to end with a little bit of like word of wisdom, right? So I think this will be interesting because normally we're asking someone who's been competing for like 15 years, bodybuilding for 20, right? So for someone who's, come onto the scene, made a big splash, hopefully bright future, long future ahead, what would you say to, the younger bodybuilder just finding the sport, just getting into it, where would you leave things?
I would first say understand that it really does take time. I can understand that I've been an athlete for a while, so my muscles are at least developed in a sense of my athleticism. But I see a lot of people, unfortunately, who are really excited about bodybuilding, maybe enter a show a little bit too soon, aren't happy with their results, and then they jump on gear. And that's just one thing that's really upsetting to see. They don't even know what their natural potential could be. Like they could look absolutely insane and they would never even give their bodies a chance to even get to that level. And so just be patient. I know it's hard, and I know it's filled with a bunch of people who love instant gratification, myself included, but you really have to slow down, understand the movements, move well, don't ego lift, lower the weight when you need to, and then it'll come. That once you get that connection, like for example, when I first started last June, I had zero connection with my lats. And now I've built a connection, and now my lats, I would say, are fairly impressive. So
Mhm.
once you get that connection, things actually do happen pretty quick, but it's finding a good coach, doing research on your own is another one, because I think coaches can teach you so much, but if you have that will and desire and, that quest for knowledge, it's going to just do you a whole lot of, good later on down the road, because you're actually learning things, not just being told, okay, move like this. I'm a big
Mhm.
person of why am I moving like this? Why am I doing this? What is being
Mhm.
worked? How can I modify this for someone like me with longer arms or whatever it may be?
Mhm.
So always ask questions, do your own research. That doesn't mean your coach is wrong, but at least you can bring some well-formed questions to your coach then that can help likely with your training.
And as
Yeah.
you alluded to, you can individualize your, your approach, because
Yeah.
everyone is a little bit different. Everyone's context a little different. Everyone's proportions a little different,
Exactly.
All
Yeah,
right.
for
Good
example,
message.
like my hack squat, I hate hack squat because my legs are so short, my torso is long, so I have a lot of pressure in my lower back. So I do like a pendulum squat instead, where I feel like I just have more control and I feel more quad activation.
Do you do well
So
with free squatting patterns too?
mostly I would say yes. Just not for very high reps. I can do a decent load for lower reps, but when it gets higher again, I get a little bit of soreness in my lower back. And I could also be performing the movement wrong, but I feel like for me, my upper body just takes so much of the hit when my legs are just so, I don't know, dinky almost.
All right. Well, good. I love it. Patience is, I think, something that's often overlooked, right? Everyone wants the magic secret. What can I do here? What exercise do I need to do? Where in reality, it's just give it time.
Yep.
So for those that want to learn from you, for those that want to follow your prep journey this year and in the future, where can people find you?
On Instagram mainly, just at tfitty. I don't really go on Facebook that often, so yeah, just Instagram when I am available. Usually on the off season, I take some time off, but during competition time, I'm usually posting quite a bit.
Okay, there we go. So T-Fitty on Instagram. Well, we appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I think this was a great conversation. And I think that just about wraps it up for the latest episode of the Natty News Daily podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, T, for coming
Absolutely.
on.